I'm Dr. Kev Hilton. I'm from the Department of Design at Northumbria University in England. And I'm going to be talking to my paper today, which is Understanding Me-dressing, an opportunity for greater inclusion through design research and practice. And I hope by the end of this you'll have an understanding of the term me-dressing and appreciate how we might be applying this within design practice. In order to make a good start at anything, it's argued that we must first accept. However, many people refuse to accept until they understand. There's an emotional response going on there. However, you must accept that this lecture is about me-dressing before you can begin to develop a better understanding of the term. An effective way to begin a meaningful dialogue, then, is through defining common terms of reference and raise the shared level of literacy. And that's really important. If we don't develop the literacy within our profession and those associated professions, then we can't be as creative or critical within those domains. Nevertheless, humankind have many languages and may have many terms, and each of these may have a number of context-dependent meanings. So to inform design practice, therefore, it's important to facilitate and manage an effective communication, better appreciating the terms and contexts. Typically, we may do this in a verbal and textual forms. But what I present here are some visual tools to engage new approaches to gender and the dressing of the individual. Now, while the focus is on dressing, I do believe this applies to other articles as well. So for those of you who are watching this who are not, say, fashion designers, I would say it still should have meaning. To do this, I need to begin with a selection of core terms. Performativity. This came from the work of Judith Butler, and it refers to the way a person performs their gender. So, you know, the sort of the front that they use. Even though performativity is developmental, it builds up as we develop from children. It could be seen as a cosmetic front. The way people dress, speak and move as an external expression may not be the same as what they feel internally. Now the term sex, this is a good example of a root of many associated misunderstandings, since the English term is used both to refer to the act of sexual intercourse but also categorising gender of a person. So, as an example, the term transsexual might then be misunderstood by some as referring to the changing of sexual orientation, which may produce anxieties or fears for them through that misunderstanding, rather than appreciating that this can refer to somebody undergoing gender confirmation surgery. So, representing or representing terminology to improve understanding, in this presentation I therefore propose to make more meaningful some of these definitions. In review of more recent thinking amongst the gender studies community, so I've spent a number of years looking at the way terms are used and questioning how they might be used better, so that the breadth of me-dressing can be better understood. Now, a me-dresser is someone whose experience of gender is that they feel relief and pleasure when performing as themselves. And this is the majority of us. We feel right when we are dressed as ourselves. And a cross-dresser is someone whose experience of gender is that they feel relief or pleasure when performing as someone other than themselves. That's quite important. We associate cross-dressing with men dressing as women, but it can work the other way round. It can have additional connotations. It's about dressing as other. Now, these are both examples of personal constructs. They reflect the internal perception. So, it's a personal construct perspective. Now, cross-gender, this is somebody whose expression of gender is considered by society to be outside or other than the acceptable normative binary gender. And this is another important point. We develop a perception of what is normal around these categorical models, typically binary models, oversimplified models. And cisgender refers to someone whose expression of gender is considered by society to be in keeping with the acceptable normative binary gender. And this again is the majority of us. Most people don't use the term cisgender, but nevertheless, within gender studies, that is how the majority of us are referred to. And this is what we call a social construct. And we gain these because we develop expectations of what society, our social group, our family expect of us. So when might we experience conflicts between the personal and social constructs? It's been reported by some women that they experienced a form of forced feminisation in preparing for and during black tie events, where they are expected to wear evening dresses, making them feel rather like cross-dressers. It's not all of them, but some of them have reported that experience and being quite uncomfortable. Similarly, for some men in suits, they may be feeling distinctly uncomfortable, and while the term cross-dresser may not come immediately to mind with that experience, they are relieved when they can remove such incongruous clothing, not fitting that sense of me. And this is a conflict, as I said, between the personal and social constructs over the issue of me dressing. So, when might we question gender? Commonly, this occurs subconsciously. It is going on all the time, but we may be conscious of it at times, as we attempt to judge how best to respond to others and their performance of gender. We question our own gender far less frequently, so the general sense is we are questioning things external to ourselves in order to judge how best to respond. We may be aware that we question the gender of articles, for example, when buying a product or using a service. So it may be disturbing to some people if an article cannot be easily categorised as the gender it was intended for. Nevertheless, it is observed that the majority of us have a balance of masculine and feminine characteristics. So where the categorical models tend to make us think we've got to be completely male or completely female, that is really an extreme. The majority of us have a balance of masculine and feminine characteristics which we use, hopefully, as strengths. Now, we have some people who are gender static, and this is someone whose experience of their own gender has remained a constant, and may or may not have been questioned. And their balance of masculine and feminine characteristics appear to be static. Then we have the gender fluid people, and these are those who experience of their own gender has been noted to change across different contexts and times. question their gender earlier and more often. And their balance of masculine and feminine characteristics appear to change fluidly. So designing for the me-dresser, acknowledging now that that is a very broad spectrum, a me-dresser then could be gender static or fluid, with a need for narrow or a broad wardrobe. And the search and purchase decision-making behaviours will involve clear sense of me or not me as they're going through the racks of clothing, as opposed to this could be an alter ego, which might be the sense that somebody who is a cross-dresser may experience in that search and purchase decision-making. And when there's a lack of a definite me, selections, me selections, this may require more than visual engagement to inform the decision making, with the kinesthetic sense of feel and fit, possibly even sound and smell. So what about new perceptions of gender? How can we move beyond those categorical models to improve the way that we engage with this subject area and opportunity for design practice? If we can investigate and develop new ways of engaging with the meaning of gender experiences, it should support the facilitation of language and literacy improvements, increasing inclusion and equality of diversity, and therefore better informed design discussion and practices. This has been investigated through the development of experience cubes, the first of which was the gender cube. Now, the way the gender cube worked, basically I developed an app for this experiment, and people were able to input their perception of self and experience onto these three scales. And these three scales were developed from a study of gender studies and the three core aspects, which were the body image, the way people perceive themselves through their body, their sexual preference, and the way they behave, the performativity, the gender behaviour. And the way the scale works is that rather than just pick a single point, when people consider their experiences, they realise it's not just a finite point, it could actually have a breadth to it. So these allow for dimensions within a spectrum. That data can then be put into a 3D model and provide an understanding of the individual's placement and proportion within a volume. Now, for something that's gender static, they could find that in any context, their individual placement and proportion remains the same, but for somebody who's gender fluid, they may find that in different contexts, they've got movement. There are two ways of using the gender cube in design practice. Provide gender cube apps to individual participants to help them reflect on how they might be experiencing a situation of a product or service in terms of gender, to facilitate a deeper, more meaningful feedback, and to facilitate a group discussion and development of market personas, anticipated differences in gender experiences, identifying gaps in evidence and knowledge to address. And here's another visual form. This is the gender profile board. And what's happening here is that you're able to look at your wardrobe. You could just do this as images of the clothing or ensembles themselves, or as I've been doing here, wearing them in a studio. You could even have images of yourself wearing them in context, although that would take a little longer to prepare. And then you arrange them on these axes. And the ones I've been using are feminine to masculine and relaxed to serious. This then allows you to start thinking about the meaning of these clothes and how they relate to that sense of me dressing, because sometimes within your wardrobe you will have items that aren't quite you. So for instance, up here with me with the suit, this isn't something I normally wear, this is specific for presentations really. Other presentations which I've done on gender, I've worn jumper dresses in order to make a point about how people feel when they see that sort of thing happening in an event. So generally, I tend to wear things in the middle area, and that starts getting an appreciation of more of what is me and what is borderline me. So there's two ways of using a gender profile board. The individual can be facilitated to examine their wardrobe and or other possessions arranged on axes such as the feminine, masculine and relaxed, serious, to consider what they may be expressing about their identity through their possessions. Bearing in mind that other aspects of gender could be used to investigate the gender experience and expression of gender. As part of the discussion and development of an anticipated range of expressive possessions of the market personas. I also did interviewing as part of this research process, and that helped develop further understanding of me dressing beyond the review of literature and the development of these visual tools. So I interviewed gender static and gender fluid people to get an understanding of how they were engaging with that sense of me dressing and me-ness. And also transsexuals and cissexuals. So I had a reasonably balanced sample group. All of them had developed a keen sense of their identity and gender experience, which influenced that search and purchase decision making. A number of them noted that there seemed to be a skew in the marketplace towards products for younger people, which suggests further market opportunity for the more mature consumer. Now, with concept development, which is where you start to use the data you've gathered from these memes that I've described to you, many products do already serve the desires of me dressers, we have to acknowledge that, but there is opportunity to provide for those who are not quite being themselves. The findings of the investigation using these tools might not only identify possible new markets, but also possible new detailing needs. So clothing that is more expressive of feminine qualities, yet constructed for the male figure, frame, and clothing that is more masculine expressive, constructed for the female frame, though we have to acknowledge much has already been done in that area. And ensembles that can be easily adjusted to express gender fluidity. So there may be some gender fluid individuals who, as they move from one context to another, have a need to express their sense of gender at that moment, possibly to communicate to others, you know, the strengths that they are intending to apply or use in that context. So here we have an example of one form of changing attire within changes in context, and I'll just show you now another approach. So, you know, this is the serious mode to begin with, and then taking the jacket off, we're moving into maybe the more relaxed approach to a context there. Very quickly, we start to provide ourselves with a different sense of possible identity that's being read for us. And again, the cues that are being picked up by the way that we have changed the perception of self, registered by others in the way that we're dressing. So we're sort of coming more down towards this end. But even at the feminine end, we can go to maybe the more serious by putting on the jacket. And thereby creating a whole different sense of how we're being read, how we're applying ourselves. So, in conclusion, there's no shortage of creativity in the design industry to support a range of me-dressing solutions, enabling people to dress as themselves. You know, we as designers really have a duty to the market to provide those senses of being oneself, but also, you know, making opportunity of that marketplace, broadening it in those areas. However, with the challenges involved in facilitating open and informative responses from individuals and groups, it has been found that visual models can be effective in encouraging new reflections on differences in gender experience, because we've had many years of trying to deal with things at a textual, verbal level, but to try dealing with things at a contextual, visual level allows us to think in a different mode. The visual side broadening our opportunities for expressing our experiences. And of course, the use of conceptual designs themselves is a form of critical design practice where the concepts open up further discussion too, as I hope this video will. So design concepts can be produced through this research, as I've said, to produce talking points. To help move forward our gender-related thinking and practices, we need to support the understanding that people have the right to be themselves as me-dressers.